first of all, thank you everybody for joining today. I'm really delighted to share some more details about what this Open Community Conference is and hopefully why you should go there. All of you who answered no or maybe on the poll, I'm hoping you're going to reevaluate your poor choice, shall we say. So in a nutshell, Emily provided a quick overview earlier on. So I'm Jono, and I've spent my entire career helping organizations to build communities, whether these are external communities around a product or a service, or whether this is building a developer community around an open source project, or whether this is building internal communities as well within the walls of a company, which is often known as inner sourcing. There is huge value in in building ecosystems around our initiatives, around our products, around our services. It's kind of like taking marketing, which is primarily a broadcast mechanism, and building an engaging interactive mechanism in which your consumers and your customers and users can play a valuable role in deriving additional value in what you're doing. This is something that's keeping me busy as a consultant who helps companies to do this, but this is just something we've seen consistent growth in over the years. We've seen these hockey stick kind of growth curves across open source, across Wikipedia, OpenStreetMap. We've seen companies like Procter & Gamble, Harley-Davidson, many others building communities. So the Open Community Conference is really designed to present the very best practice and guidance for how to build communities within an open source context. So this is going to be covering areas such as governance, such as conflict resolution, community strategy, how you measure and evaluate communities, how you build diverse and inclusive communities. It's going to be a whole raft of different things like that. Now, some of you who have followed some of my work may be aware of another event that I run called the Community Leadership Summit, which happens before the O'Reilly OSCON conference. I just want to take a second to outline what the difference is between these two conferences. So the Community Leadership Summit has been going on now for about 10 years. We just did it a few months ago in Austin. And that event is really designed more for community managers and leaders to get together to help shape what community management and strategy is going to look like. So it's very, very domain-centric, right? There's a lot of kind of technical, in-depth discussions that people who are interested in community leadership would be very familiar with. The Open Community Conference is really a little different. It's really designed to be a place where we present this kind of information. So you can think of the Community Leadership Summit as a set of meetings. Like, there's not many presentations there. It's people in discussions having conversations about community management and strategy. But it can sometimes be a bit inaccessible for people who are working in companies or organizations who want to know, how to bring this best practice in without necessarily having to get into the nitty-gritty. That's what the Open Community Conference is all about. So we have a raft of content, a raft of presentations. I'm going to go through and provide a few examples in a second, which are people getting on the stage and sharing best practice with people. One of the things that I've tried to emphasize as much as possible with with the call for papers, and also with people who I know who I've said should go and submit a talk here, is we want to stay away from the theory. We want to really talk about the practice. Like, what are the practical things that you can do to build effective communities? So my hope here, and this is the first time we're running it, and I'm very confident in the schedule, is that when you go here and you sit in some of these presentations, you'll get really practical guidance and recommendations for building not just the tangible value of communities, such as growth, additional participation, additional contributions, but also that intangible value, happiness, satisfaction, engagement, retention, those sorts of things. So to give you a little bit of an example of some of the content here, I've pulled out a few picks here. We have a raft of content here, a really diverse range of content, both in terms of topics and in terms of speakers. So as an example, Guy Martin from Autodesk is going to be talking about how to be an open source zero. Guy's got a huge amount of background in terms of how you build communities inside of organizations. Used to work at Samsung, now at Autodesk, used to work at Red Hat. Elizabeth K. Joseph, who used to be in the Ubuntu community, now working with Mesosphere, is going to be talking about open source project infrastructure, scaling open source, lessons learned from the Apache Software Foundation. Obviously, Apache, you've got a long heritage. in building communities and building the Apache way. So that's going to be talking about obviously scaling up. Let me switch over to the next slide. Delighted to have Nithya and Dwayne, who have both been working in inner source and building internal communities, to talk about how you build an open source programs office. This is obviously a common thing that a lot of companies have been doing. Google, for example, I think really blazed the trail here with the work that Chris DeBone has done. Frank Karlczek from OwnCloud is going to be talking about why he forked his open source project. This was a kind of a bit of a news item a little while ago about how he literally forked his own company and why he made those decisions. Forking can be one of the most complicated elements of how you build a community. Sarah Sharp, who's got a long heritage in diversity training, and she's got her own company that focuses on diversity training here, is going to be talking about, you've got a code of conduct, now what? Which shares my personal viewpoint that a code of conduct is one component in building a diverse community, but it's not the only component you should consider. Colin, who was with Tacona, is going to be talking about bootstrapping a community, how you get a community up and running, like where do you start? Jeremy Garcia, a good friend who's been running Linux Questions, which is one of the biggest forums on the internet for technology, is going to talk about forums, Q&A resources, and mailing lists. How do you pick between these different things? Jeremy's a great speaker. I think you're going to get some great value out of that. Jim from Capital One is obviously going to be talking about licensing here. Jim is a real expert on this topic. Jessica, fantastic and hilarious speaker, is going to be talking about selling open source and keeping your soul. Corey is going to be, who works with a great VC called Underscore, who invests in a lot of open source companies such as Mautic, is going to be focusing on building a VC community. So we've got some really great content. It's a really diverse range of content. It took a while to kind of put the schedule together because I really wanted to make sure that we didn't just get like a bunch of generic open source community talk. The world has seen enough of those. So our goal here is that there'll be, the outcome that I really want to encourage here is that you look at the schedule and you come and complain to me because you want to go to 3 things at the same time. That's the whole aim of this. So, these picks that I've pulled out are not by any means the only content that we're going to have there. Please don't think that the rest of the content isn't as good as this, because it really is. It was even difficult pulling out these picks, but this is just a sample platter, an amuse-bouche, if you will, of what we're going to be having. The other thing, and it goes without saying, there's a major benefit here, I think, of going to the Open Community Conference and the wider Open Source Summit is the networking. One of the things that I hear, I've been working in open source now for coming up to 15 years, and one thing that I hear with everybody, and shares my own personal perspective, is in many cases, the real value of these conferences is not just the content, it really is the networking. People talk about the hallway track, the time that you spend in the hallway just connecting with people and getting to know people. I personally, in many cases, go to very few conference sessions. I spend most of my time kind of chatting to people, and it's hugely valuable. The Linux Foundation has done a really good job in building kind of like the place that you want to go to, because there's so many collaborative projects there, there's so many working groups here, there's so many people from different companies, different organizations. And I challenge anyone to go to this event and not derive value from the networking piece. Now, of course, you need to get out there and network. You need to go out there and chat to people. But you get a really nice collection of people who will make introductions. So don't just look at the content from this. Really look at the networking opportunities as well. And that's why the pieces that Emily was talking about earlier on, like the evening events and the other events that are going on, I think are so valuable. Some of you who will be watching this will be at the beginning of your career, or will be brand new to open source, or brand new to this. When I started out going to conferences, I found it was one of the most valuable ways of kind of building my career. So I'm always cognizant of the fact that like a lot of people who I work with are in my consultancy today are executives in companies, people who've been around the block quite a bit. But I think if you're watching this and you're brand new, there's a huge amount of value that you can derive from this. Just getting to know people, getting your name out there, consuming some really interesting content. So I think there's I couldn't sing the praises enough of the Linux Foundation in putting this event together. It's going to be a lot of fun.